The Third World War is already underway. It's just very different to the previous wars. And it's a war on everyone on the planet. And it's a war that requires a constant daily diet of fear. And it turns us into cognitive dissonance, which means we can't really recognize the truth in anything. And people have to tell lies and show their loyalties. We witness that with the leaders of different governments around the world and the things they say. Well, it's not been a willing journey. Most people are quite reluctant to go on this journey, and I think that's true for the prime ministers and the governments. They don't really want to be Zionist puppets. They don't really perhaps want to be in the EU, but just reality demands it, you know. But it's not really capitalism that we're a part of. It's parasitism. It's parasitism. It comes from the word parasite. It's just living off the work of everyone. You see, we've forgotten all our heritage. We were all tribal, we all had a culture and a history, and that's become virtually illegal. If you had a leader today that wanted to extol their culture and heritage and champion it, they would be called a despot or a fascist or a Nazi. No, there's a whole new persona being created. We're really talking about Zionism. Now, you know, there's a lot of trolls, a lot of smut, a lack of civility taking over, and it's being encouraged. And we have different instincts. I discussed our materialistic side the other day, but we also have vanity. And Zionism preys upon this. It relies upon it. It inculcates it. Without us worshipping our own vain, our own vanity, Zionism would collapse. That is the way to fight it. You cannot fight it otherwise. Hitler tried, and Hitler seemed to care about the German people. Well, that's not permitted, I'm sorry. So you get ideologies that come and go, and we obviously need a new one now. But they're always undermined, they're always corrupted and infiltrated. And I've made previous videos saying if you want to join an anti-Zionist movement, you will be in the clutch of the Zionists because they run them all. Otherwise the group is called a terrorist and you can't talk to them. So, you know, battling isn't perhaps the right way to go about this. They control everything. They control all the governments, all our media, all our thinking. People are indoctrinated totally. And if they were only in existence for the last 50 or 100 years or so, then you could think, well, they could be overcome and brought to their knees. But they've been going for centuries, longer. And of course, not with the name Zionism. But that's the problem. They're very well entrenched. I saw a tweet that Lord Rothschild died in a helicopter crash. I don't know if it's true. I think there was some speculation in that, but there was just a crash, a small plane and a helicopter in England. And it might be true, and it makes me think of what's happened in Saudi Arabia. But in Saudi Arabia, there's multiple reports now that the king will abdicate next week and turn his throne over to the 32-year-old prince. Well, that's a country that's just ready to be sacrificed. It's on a suicide mission. No one can understand. You know, I've kind of talked to a couple Saudis, and of course they know more than me about Saudi Arabia. I've never been there ever. And they ask me what's going on. They are so confused and destabilized and impossible for them to know what is going on in that country, their own people. So it's doomed. And Israel gets the blame. Israel's in every report. Jared Kushner's in every report. I mentioned a book earlier by Sebastian Junger, which a subscriber brought to my attention about tribes. And it It looks fascinating, and I think there was an American president, but certainly, well, there were slave owners, and they discussed the American Indians, and you could raise them in your family, raise them all their life, and they go back to their people, the American tribe, for a visit, and they'd never want to return again to the white man's land. They just didn't like it. And that is very, very interesting. And I really think we could live through the same revelation if we could return to some form of tribalism. What we've got now are governments, and they're sucking us dry, and they're Zionist puppets, and they're going to endless wars, and they're bombing people with no defense. And the people getting bombed and hurt are largely non-combatants. I'm repeating myself. But, I brought up the issue of support our troops. And someone said, if you support your troops, you're supporting the Zionist encroachment on the world. And they are all Zionist wars. And all these governments are Zionist pawns, fodder. So until we wake up, we're not going to get out of this. All our news is pretty much fake. I was reading the head of the counterterrorism in the U.S. unit is stepping down. It's just a headline. And it talked about his history, and he was assistant to Dennis Ross as a Middle East envoy under Clinton. It was such an anti-Arab policy at that time, and I don't think it's changed, but there was no facade at that time. And so, that sums up American policy and who these people are in important roles and positions. Anti-terrorism. What a joke, man. Well, what I mean by that is, he's probably been very busy blaming the Arabs. Now he's changing his tune. He wants to blame the Russians or the Chinese. But, it's so pathetic that it's all about hatred and leading us to nowhere. I don't know how much sense I made. It's just that, obviously, if you worked under Dennis Ross, was totally anti-Arab. And that's who you have leading the anti-terrorism unit. It doesn't sound right to me. On the subject of media, you've got Assange. He's a big hero in the alternative news circuit. 1 million leaks he's released. 1 million. But not one about 9/11. I think he's on record as saying 9/11's the real thing. It wasn't an inside job, but I may be wrong. But you're not going to hear from anybody. You're not going to hear any truth from anybody. The web is spread so far now. There's no room for an independent voice, and there's little ability to have an independent voice when we're being saturated with, smut, really. And you're always being enticed into what looks like a compromising position. You're always being made to look like you're doing something you're not doing when you're a thorn in their side, They have nothing better to do. But you can be sure they're in powerful positions. This is what it's like on the street, when you're not doing what they want you to do. Well, I'm continuing on this new journey of not really covering the news and all the news headlines. It's different. I need your help with donations. Please send anything along to any of the links in the description below the video. I can't do it without your help. And I get some credit from I've got some people that think I'm doing a good job. So I appreciate it if you can help. And I wish I could say more, but I don't know. I think I covered it all.